It all starts with a quiet city routine, where the days just drift by without any joy or sense of accomplishment. That is, until this world turned into a total nightmare, invaded by bizarre monsters with destruction everywhere you looked. Amidst it all, the protagonist watches the chaos from a rooftop, wondering if people would think he was crazy for wanting to enjoy this change of pace. He stares up at a colossal demonic tower, blown away by the absurd size of the structure tearing through the red sky. Deep down, the idea of a battle of wits and skill against the demon race seemed absolutely fascinating. So, he excitedly adjusts his hat, thinking this whole life or elimination situation looks like it could be a ton of fun. 1 year earlier, dungeons had suddenly just popped up all over the world. Creatures immune to modern weapons emerged from them, plunging humanity into absolute chaos and fear. However, someone noticed that these monsters and settings were identical to a famous game called Vanaheim Online. The game had become reality, and certain people began to awaken as players capable of fighting the threats. Gaining specific classes, they combined their skills and formed guilds to go head-to-head with the monsters. The fight for survival became the new normal, and among the major enemies was Balzafal, one of the 5 high-ranking demons. Leading the charge, the guild master of Radiant Spear orders everyone to advance without fear to secure the group's honor. The members are super confident they're about to climb the ranks and even make plans for a celebratory BBQ when they get back. Full of energy, they charge the demon head-on, preparing their magical and physical attacks. Unimpressed by their advance, Balzafal simply raises his hands, gathering a sinister purple energy. The girl in the guild realizes too late that something is very wrong with that power. In a single move, the demon unleashes his magic, wiping out the players with 0 difficulty. Their bodies drop to the cold floor, completely defeated before they even laid a finger on the enemy. The leader barely survives, in shock at the insane power gap that took them all out in just 1 hit. The villain thinks it would be a huge waste to just finish off the survivor right then and there. Summoning a magic circle, the demon decides he's going to use the warrior to have a little fun. Suddenly, the leader is transported to a scorching landscape, completely disoriented. He looks around in terror, trying to understand how he ended up in the middle of a volcano. The giant figure of the demon appears on the scene, mocking how humans ignore the essence of things. The warrior despairs, realizing that everyone there has their days numbered. But a carefree tune breaks the tension as the protagonist casually strolls onto the scene. Analyzing the environment, he compliments the quality of the illusion, impressed by the level of detail. Tipping his hat provocatively, he asks the demon if he can project that anywhere he wants. Intrigued, Balzafal hadn't expected a mere insect to figure out his trick so easily. With a simple snap of his fingers, the villain dispels all the magic in the area. The scene returns to the dark hall of the tower, leaving the warrior relieved that it was just a trick. Even though he's calmer, the leader is still on edge about the dangerous situation they're in. Just then, he finally notices the newcomer and is clueless as to how the guy just appeared out of thin air. Ignoring the tension, the protagonist is already snooping around the castle shelves, fascinated by the relics. He picks up a curious artifact, excited to see if a human could play around with a demon's treasures. Balzafal turns his attention to the kid, annoyed by his audacity in touching his stuff. The sphere in the protagonist's hands begins to emit a pulsating purple energy. The warrior desperately yells for the kid to stop, warning him that this place is lethal even for veterans. Totally confident, the protagonist replies that danger is exactly where you should look for fun. The demon gets ticked off by the mockery and warns that figuring out the illusion won't save them from being crushed. Raising his magical power, the villain orders them to burn and crawl before his new flame attack. The kid does an agile backflip, feeling the extreme heat of the illusory lava trying to consume him. Landing safely, he analyzes the attack and finally understands how the enemy's ability works. Casually walking forward, he reveals that the monster was hiding real boulders inside the illusions. Holding a piece of ordinary rock, he shows the true nature of the attack he just dodged. The villain recoils in surprise, realizing his main trick has been completely exposed. Showing off the dark sphere, the kid deduces that the item creates false sensations, a demonic heirloom. Clicking his tongue, the demon tries to downplay the discovery, saying that trick was just a sideshow. Furious at the humiliation, he concentrates a massive amount of purple power, promising to reduce the kid to dust. Without losing his good humor, the protagonist announces it's about time he joined the game too. Activating the playful spirit ability, he uses the freshly stolen artifact to draw out its true potential. Several illusory copies of him appear throughout the hall, challenging the monster to guess which one is real. The monster can't believe a simple human managed to steal and control his precious heirloom. In a fit of rage, he fires his devastating magic to annihilate all the copies at once. The illusions scatter quickly, dodging the energy blast before it can reach them. The colossal beam explodes against the castle walls, causing a thunderous impact on the environment. When the smoke clears, the kid announces that the enemy missed every single target by a mile. Appearing by surprise, he taunts, asking who really failed to see the true essence of the battle. With a cunning look, He explains that the illusion was just a cover for the cooldown of that massive spell. Consumed by rage, the monster grinds its teeth at such insolence from an inferior being. The protagonist gets ready to finish the job, but suddenly realizes he forgot his main weapon. He turns to the guild leader and asks to borrow his spear in a very casual tone. Using mimicry, he creates an exact copy of the magic weapon right in his hands. Right after, he summons a divinity, a technique that generates random effects depending on the roll. A huge golden die begins to spin in the air, glowing intensely as it decides the fate of the attack. The copied spear absorbs the power and grows to an absurd size, becoming a weapon of colossal proportions. Wielding the giant version with ease, he announces that the final blow is on its way. Gaining momentum, the kid hurls the pillar of cutting energy straight at the enemy. The demon lets out a roar of pain as the magical projectile hits its body dead on. A radiant explosion completely destroys the villain, who had no chance to defend against the impact. As he turns to dust, the monster can't accept that he was eliminated by such an absurd trick. After the attack, the kid lands softly on the hall floor, now free from any threat. Satisfied with the result, he comments that fighting is only worth it if it's this much fun. The wounded warrior just watches in shock, realizing the kid eliminated the monstrous creature all by himself, and just for kicks. The guild leader is completely baffled as he looks at the kid's magical status screen. The glowing interface clearly displays his classes, player. Staring at the cloaked young man, the warrior comments that he'd never heard of a class like that before. This whole story began with a man isolated in a dark office in the middle of the night. Walking through the company hallways with his head down, he was someone who didn't know what it meant to have fun. With an empty gaze and dark circles under his eyes, exhaustion dominated his life. Until this same young man ended up awakening as the ultimate player, deciding to clear every dungeon in the world. 1 year before this turning point, the company building's lights were still on in the middle of the night. The sound of a mouse clicking nonstop echoed through the empty operations room. The young man named Yuma Anno tried to focus on the computer screen, wearing an exhausted expression. Just then, his boss suddenly appears, slamming his hand on the desk and demanding more enthusiasm at work. Tatsuka starts yelling right in his ear, complaining that he was dead weight for not hitting his monthly quota. Yuma tries to argue that he already works until the last train leaves and asks if he needs to come in on weekends. Using a manipulative excuse, the man says that the time to focus and grow is precisely when others are resting. Exploited from morning till night at 25, the young man just accepts the pressure with his head down. The only salvation from the young man's miserable routine was the famous game Vanaheim Online. The title had already surpassed 50 million users, becoming a true global phenomenon. The great charm of that mythological universe lay in its engaging stories and characters that seemed to have a life of their own. The dungeons required complex strategies and a lot of cooperation with other players to be cleared. On top of that, the free-form progression system and rare event items made all the virtual effort worthwhile. For someone living as a corporate slave, fighting magical dragons on a screen was liberating. That digital world represented the only escape where he felt he was in control of his own choices. Sitting on the floor of his dark room, he spent his nights playing in a team and renewing the group spells. The young man felt genuinely happy with his headphones on, believing these days would last forever. Until a familiar voice calls out to him harshly on the street near his home. His boss confronts him in a suit, saying he saw him online over the weekend, and concludes that he has plenty of free time. The superior also played the game and had previously gone through the employee's phone to find out his account name. In a swift move, Tatsuka snatches the phone from Yuma's hand, informing him that from now on, he will work every single day. Staring at the phone screen, the man announces he's going to transfer all the rare items and equipment to his own character. Yuma panics and tries to get his phone back, begging his boss not to steal the achievements he valued most. In a merciless tone, the man informs him that the account has been deleted, leaving the young man completely devastated and shattered. He doesn't even remember how he got home after suffering such cruel abuse from his boss. Curled up in bed in the dead of night, Yuma could only wish that this unjust world would simply come to an end. At that exact moment, the fabric of reality began to silently tear apart in his room. As soon as the next morning arrived, his heavy automatic steps led him to the same old destination. Even though he was broken inside, his submissive employee instinct made him walk to the entrance of the company building. Looking at the ground, he thought that he needed to hit that darn quota so his salary wouldn't be cut again. Suddenly, the young man blinks, noticing the atmosphere around him has changed drastically. Startled, he finds himself in the middle of a blue stone corridor, with no idea where the office went. Running to the large wooden door, he forces the handle hard but notices it's stuck. Analyzing the wood's texture and the lock, he recognizes that the design is identical to the game he loves so much. A chilling noise echoes through the empty corridor, making the young man whip his head around in alert. A bizarre beast with sharp teeth emerges, snarling from the darkness, instantly recognized as one of the virtual monsters. The creature lunges at him, forcing the young man to back away to avoid getting hit head-on. but the claws graze his suit jacket, tearing the fabric and injuring his shoulder. Holding his wounded shoulder, he feels the real pain of the attack and is shocked by the absurd situation. With no way to fight back, the young man bolts down the stone corridor to avoid being devoured next. The chase continues through the narrow dungeon paths, with the monster growling furiously right behind him. The young man slams on the brakes when he comes face to face with a crossroads at the end of the corridor. Knowing he can't stop to think, he quickly turns right, enduring the sting of his wound. After losing the beast, he slumps against a heavy gate, panting and trying to catch his breath. Looking at the torches and stone blocks around him, everything confirmed this wasn't a figment of his imagination. The monster that almost got him was also an exact copy of the digital model he spent hours fighting. Pale, he finally puts the pieces together and deduces that one of the game's dungeons has simply invaded reality. Amid the tense silence, the mysterious glint of an object in the background catches his eye. In the center of the area was a floating pedestal surrounded by coins, emitting a soft, magical light. Walking slowly toward the stone structure, he gets closer to investigate the ancient book resting there. The lavish, detailed cover indicated the title was the famous Diary of a Thousand Nights. Reading the first few pages, he realizes they are a traveler's chronicles, a super rare item that never actually existed in the game. The text described funny dangers, like an underground poisonous mushroom stew party with witches. The next illustration showed a sketch of an epic fishing duel against a gigantic sea monster. After that, the page told of how the author was banned from a dangerous guild for cheating at a card game. Reading about that level of audacity, a light, relaxed laugh escapes the young man's lips. He starts laughing to himself in the dungeon, finding it incredible how someone could live so freely. Remembering his own life, he feels like a complete idiot for having bowed his head and accepted his boss's abuse at the office. Tears begin to drip onto the old pages as he feels envious of that fantastic, untethered journey. Crying in frustration over his own choices, Yuma wishes from the bottom of his soul that he could live with that same freedom from now on. The diary reacts to his true feelings and begins to emit an intense glow in the dark corridor. The book floats on its own, creating a magical ring of light and flying pages throughout the stone environment. Confused by the phenomenon, the young man takes a step back, watching the mysterious glow fill the air. A warm, revitalizing energy envelops his body, instantly healing the wound on his shoulder. The world system soon announces that he has awakened, replacing his employee suit with magical attire. Puzzled by the dark cape and feathered hat, he checks the message stating he has obtained a legendary class. The floating interface confirms he has become a level 1 player, a hidden and unprecedented class in history. Before he could properly celebrate, the large, heavy wooden door swings open on its own with a loud bang. Looking into the dark corridor, Yuma realizes the monster from before is heading straight for him. Now that he's a player, he knows he can fight, but the problem is he's completely unarmed. Just then, the bizarre beast smashes through the wooden door and invades the area. The young man braces for the confrontation, fully aware that he needs to defeat the creature or he'll end up done for. Seeing the system panels glow, he adjusts his hat, confident that he knows this game better than anyone and will manage to win. The monster lets out a furious roar, staring down its new prey. Looking for an opening, Yuma quickly ducks, trying to find some way to counter the attack. He picks up a rock from the ground and throws it with all his might toward the enemy. The beast makes an aggressive leap forward, completely ignoring the attempt. The rock flies right past the airborne monster, missing the target by a long shot. Without losing his cool, the young man comments that a little rock like that obviously wouldn't even tickle it. However, he clutches another piece of rock in his hand with a plan in mind. Unleashing a rapid barrage of stones, he hits the creature dead on with a sequence of critical hits. The beast falls to the ground defeated, making Yuma celebrate his perfectly executed strategy. Analyzing his own status screen, he concludes that his extremely high luck stat guarantees these critical hits if he attacks multiple times. Holding the sharp fragment the monster dropped, he gets a direct boost to his attack power. With fire in his eyes, the young man charges full speed toward the next target. In a quick leap, he delivers a precise cutting blow right through the middle of the beast. The creature is thrown backward, falling completely defeated on the stone floor. Super excited about the victory, Yuma cheers as he sees the system screen confirming he has reached level 2. Enveloped in a greenish aura, he feels the true power of a player coursing through his veins. Soon, he continues down the dark corridor, completely focused on getting out of that place alive. He stops in front of a sinister purple portal, deducing that he can only escape if he defeats the boss. Entering the new area, he quickly notices the silhouette of a person standing in the middle of the stone hall. The face of his boss, Tatsuka, is revealed in the darkness, wearing a malicious and arrogant smile. Recalling the path to get there, Yuma notes that leveling up has made the monster's attacks quite easy to handle. Since he already knew the game by heart, he knew the exact right moment to dodge enemy blows. Back at the monumental entrance, he faces the large, heavy door and wonders if this is really the boss's lair. A familiar voice suddenly calls his name, catching the young man completely by surprise. The sound of boots echoes on the stone floor as the person mockingly comments that he seems to be doing well for himself. In complete shock, Yuma's eyes widen as he comes face to face with that terrifying figure from his past. Wearing warrior armor, Tatsuka laughs and comments that he came to check on his work but ended up in this mess. Letting out a booming laugh, the man boasts about having killed a few weak monsters and becoming a level 6 warrior. The young man lowers his head in silence, feeling all the intimidating pressure from his superior come back to haunt him. Drawing his sword, the suit and tie-wearing man informs him that the employee will serve as live bait to distract the room's boss. Yuma is speechless upon hearing such an absurd plan. With a sadistic look, Tatsuka advances and grabs the young man by the collar, reminding him that the boss's word is an absolute order. Without a shred of pity, the man lands a hard kick on the kid's back, pushing him straight into danger. The protagonist tries to catch his breath and regain his balance, surrounded by a sinister smoke and growls coming from the darkness. A gigantic, hideous beast emerges right behind him, drooling with hunger and ready to attack. The monster lets out a deafening roar, baring all its sharp teeth at its new prey. A blast of purple energy cuts through the floor, forcing the young man to jump away while yelling for his boss. Watching with his arms crossed, Tatsuka just smiles and tells him to get devoured already so the creature will let its guard down. The colossal beast raises its claws, ready to crush the kid, while the suited man thinks it's normal for a subordinate to perish for him. The heavy blow hits the ground violently, making Yuma throw himself to the side in a desperate attempt not to be flattened. Cornered, the kid refuses to accept that he's going to meet his end there because of such a trashy guy, knowing he's gotten stronger too. Just then, a bright light suddenly appears, and a voice says it can't just stand by and watch this injustice. Lying on the ground, the young man watches as magical energy materializes right in front of him. The spirit of a hatted adventurer forms in the air, calling the young man the Chosen One. Completely confused by the ghostly appearance, Yuma asks who the heck this old guy is. Laughing, the spirit says his identity doesn't matter. What matters is that the kid has already become a player. Then, the old ghost advises the young man to have more fun and promises to lend him his strength. Watching from a distance, the boss finds it strange how the atmosphere is changing so suddenly. The gigantic monster freezes in place, paralyzed by some mysterious force before it can attack. Annoyed by the delay, Tatsuka tells the kid to stop mumbling to himself and go get eaten by the beast already. The protagonist's face darkens for a second, showing that something inside him has finally changed. Lifting a sharp, determined gaze, he calls out his former boss's name firmly. The suited man blinks in surprise, not understanding the abrupt change in the submissive kid's attitude. Enveloped in an intense greenish energy, Yuma announces loud and clear that he is no one's subordinate anymore. Floating beside him, the spirit encourages him to seize the moment and prepares to teach him how to use a real skill. Breaking free from the paralysis, the colossal beast lets out an aggressive roar and charges at the young man, thirsty for blood. Very calmly, the spirit smiles and just snaps his fingers to intervene in the fight. A gigantic pillar of green energy erupts around the protagonist, instantly stopping the monster's advance. The shock of the magical light hits the boss monster dead on, making it retreat in a daze. The pressure of the power is so strong that even the smaller monsters around are thrown far away. Watching the scene, the ghost mockingly comments that the suited man seems like just another useless goon. The giant monster growls furiously at them, still trying to recover from the blinding light. In a playful tone, the spirit translates that the beast is telling the kid to finish Tatsuka off. Hesitantly, the young man tries to argue that the jerk is still his superior. The old ghost shrugs, stating that titles mean nothing and that the boss is just another pawn being used. Facing reality, the spirit's voice warns that it's past time to wake up from this office nightmare, because the real adventure has begun. A confident smile finally spreads across Yuma's face as he internalizes that he is now a free player. Full of attitude, he takes a firm step forward, leaving fear completely behind. Bathed in the magical light of the dungeon, he declares with his head held high that he will live the way he wants. Far away, Tatsuka freaks out in anger, not understanding anything, yelling for the kid to shut up and get devoured by the beast already. Bathed in this green energy, Yuma announces loud and clear that he no longer takes orders from him. Far away, Tatsuka is furious with the rebellion and threatens to ruin the kid's performance review. But the protagonist ignores the tantrum and focuses on his magic, activating a bluff skill. The mystical power alters the target's perception, creating a perfect illusion in the enemy's mind. Struck by the bright light, the suited man recoils, not understanding what just happened. Just then, his emotional state quickly transforms into pure terror. Looking ahead, he sees the terrifying figure of his own company's CEO staring him down. The illusion roars at the man, aggressively demanding an explanation for his work performance. Shaking in his boots, Tatsuka panics and tries to justify his presence there. The cowardly boss immediately drops to his knees, desperately begging for a good evaluation. Taking advantage of the distraction, the illusory figure moves in angrily to punch him. In reality, The one who lands the devastating blow on the suited man is the monstrous beast itself. With the violent impact, the man's sword flies far down the stone corridor. Watching from the sidelines, Yuma realizes that his ex-boss only thought about saving his own skin until the very last second. Tatsuka's battered body is thrown hard against the dungeon wall, falling in defeat. Without wasting time, the beast raises its enormous claws to finish off the fallen target. The suited man cries in despair, feeling that his end has truly come. However, Yuma moves in the blink of an eye and blocks the attack, announcing that he doesn't have to go today. Floating beside them, the spirit praises his attitude, showing the difference in character between the two. On the ground, Tatsuka stammers out an apology and begs for help from the kid he had tormented so much. Holding back the monster, the protagonist tells the coward to get out of his sight once and for all. Quickly, the man gets up and flees, crying in fear, far from the battle. With the path clear, Yuma goes on the offensive and lands a deep cut on his adversary. The giant beast retreats, wounded, completely losing its balance from the damage received. Going all in for the finish, the young man prepares a decisive energy-filled strike. The attack tears through the air and splits the monstrous boss in two, eliminating the threat on the spot. The system screen glows, announcing he has reached level 5 and unlocked the mimicry skill. Soon after, the immense doors of the hall open on their own, revealing a shining passageway. Walking calmly through the exit, he finally returns to the modern streets of his city. The young man lets out a sigh of relief, super satisfied to have cleared his first dungeon. Suddenly, the kid is shocked when he notices the chaos around him. Bizarre crystalline towers were tearing through the city's buildings, changing the entire urban landscape. On the big screens throughout the streets, news channels were broadcasting urgent updates on the absurd situation. The report confirmed that dungeons identical to the online game had sprouted up all over the world. Furthermore, an unknown continent had appeared in the middle of the ocean, causing widespread panic. Standing in the middle of the street, Yuma watches the news on the giant screens in disbelief. The civilians around him fall into total despair, screaming about the end of the world. But the protagonist finds this whole fusion of real life with virtual reality very interesting. Seeing his excitement, the ghost spirit comments that he chose the right kid for the mission. Curious, the young man thanks him for his help in the fight and finally asks for his partner's identity. Full of style, the old man introduces himself as Ludian, saying he's just a regular player. Right away, Yuma connects the dots and realizes this is the author of that magical diary from the dungeon. The spirit advises that crying won't solve the chaos, so the best thing to do is to enjoy it all. Agreeing with the idea, the kid already looks around for his next adventure and focuses on a target. He spots a mysterious tower in the distance, recognizing the exact shape of the structure from the game. Excited by the discovery, he realizes that heading there could lead to some really good fun. Passing through a glowing portal, he walks down a long, divine corridor of white stones. Reaching the end of the path, he stops before an imposing and majestic gate of light. The interior holds a giant statue of a goddess, emitting a sacred and mysterious aura. Exploring the place, he recognizes the scene perfectly as the famous tutorial dungeon. Confused, Ludian floats beside him and asks what on earth they came to do in a place for newbies. The kid calmly replies that there's a sealed room with a very special chest around here. The ghost quickly catches on and remembers the famous hidden treasure of the goddess. Ever since the game's launch, the artifact was visible to everyone, but no one ever figured out how to open it. The prize inside was the legendary dream item of any explorer in that world. Confidently, the young man announces that he's finally had a brilliant idea to break the seal for good. Laughing at his audacity, the spirit encourages the kid to make the world his playground. Then, Ludian announces he's going to take a nap and simply vanishes into thin air. The young man is annoyed by his partner's slack, who always disappears whenever it's convenient. Following the path, he enters the illuminated circular room, known as the Labyrinth of Beginnings. Before the stone altar, he observes a divine energy manifesting right in front of him. The projection of a golden goddess appears, welcoming the player and promising to be his guide. Watching the scene, the young man realizes the dialogue is identical to the game's classic tutorial. In a serene voice, the entity explains that here he will learn the basics of combat and exploration. She finishes the introduction by raising her hand and offering her sacred blessing to the newcomer. Charmed by the graphical details in real life, Yuma finds the goddess even more majestic up close. Super focused, he decides to skip the fluff and deal with what really matters in the hall. The entity tells him to check his status screen, but the kid simply turns his back and walks away. Ignoring the celestial guide talking about health and energy, he proceeds directly through the hall. A bit annoyed, she turns to tell him to open the supply box, but notices he's already looted everything. Holding a useless bronze sword, he complains that he'd already found better weapons before. Trying to maintain the tutorial's composure, the goddess focuses on a jet of flames sprouting from the floor. She quickly alerts him that a monster has just invaded the testing area. A very weak fire spirit appears, while the guide tells the young man to hold his weapon firmly. Bored, Yuma prepares to finish the creature off quickly, annoying the entity for not taking the test seriously. The goddess congratulates the protagonist with great joy for defeating the first enemy of the tutorial. Yuma simply ignores the praise and turns around with the basic bronze sword in hand. Focused on his own absurd plan, the kid adjusts his grip on the weapon menacingly. Without any warning, he dashes forward and unleashes a tearing strike right at the sacred entity. The swift attack catches the goddess completely off guard. The force of the blade creates a luminous trail across the hall. Annoyed by the newbie's audacity, she demands to know what he's doing and tells him not to destroy the place. Realizing his plan is working, the young man prepares to annoy the entity even more. He knows very well that provoking the guide would make the secret boss, the goddess of wrath, appear. Consumed by hatred, the deity's form darkens, and horns sprout from her head. Seeing the transformation up close, Yuma finds the resemblance to the hidden monster very impressive. The boss was actually the goddess's sealed power source in a terrible dungeon. Defeating this corrupted version would grant him the crown of thorns, capable of opening the treasure room. Recalling old information from the game, the kid puts the pieces together about the prison's exact location. With that, he points his weapon at the deity and questions if she knows anything about that chest. The goddess stammers nervously, trying to change the subject, and tells him to focus on his skill training. But the protagonist doesn't care about the tutorial and attacks again with the bronze sword. A dark smile takes over the entity's face as her patience finally runs out. The dark power explodes across the scene, and she bellows furiously, telling the punk to pay attention to her. Adjusting his hat, super satisfied, Yuma cheers, confirming that his theory was completely right. The system announces that the goddess of wrath has awakened as the great hidden challenge of the first level. Enveloped in a red aura, the beast guarantees that the cheeky young man will not get away with this provocation. With a monstrous roar of fury, the dark creature charges forward, tearing up the stone floor. She unleashes a brutal and extremely fast attack against the kid. The violent impact sends the player's body flying through the air. Trying to stabilize himself, he feels first then that this monster's strength is on another level. The beast's sharp claws are already trying to tear the target to pieces in the blink of an eye. Letting out another desperate roar, the creature of darkness leaps mercilessly toward the young man. Completely shocked by the absurd speed of the charge, the protagonist realizes he won't be able to dodge. A heavy, cutting blow hits the spot, raising a cloud of smoke. The basic sword flies from his hand and falls uselessly on the battle hall floor. Certain of her victory, the evil version of the goddess bellows, finding it highly amusing to finally vent her rage. Full of pent-up hatred, she complains about how much of a pain it was to be forced to present that stupid tutorial. The kid emerges unharmed and panting in a corner of the labyrinth, admitting that was a very close call. Noticing his presence behind her, the creature turns her head, startled and completely confused. Playing with the dark artifact in his hands, the protagonist celebrates that his illusion worked at the perfect moment. He now holds the essential item needed to unlock the secret passage of that place. The beast puts a hand to her head, and is shocked to realize the crown was stolen without her even noticing. Satisfied with his own trick, the young man displays a look full of confidence. Raising his arms in total excitement, he declares that all this adrenaline was fantastic. Holding the legendary item, the young man adjusts the brim of his hat and announces that the untouched treasure will now be his. Turning his back on the danger, he calmly walks toward the gigantic, locked stone portal. The crown of thorns reacts to the area's energy and begins to emit a strong magical glow. With a powerful boom, the immense sacred doors finally unlock on their own. The player's eyes shine with excitement, seeing the path clear for the first time in history. Looking inside the secret location, the kid is amazed by his discovery. In the center of the chamber rested an extremely luxurious and radiant golden chest. Before the untouched pedestal, the young man ponders which legendary item might be waiting for him inside. Without wasting time, he lifts the heavy golden lid, releasing all the sealed magic. The system soon announces that he has just acquired the sacred ring capable of restoring life. Yuma holds the jewel up to the light, completely fascinated by the absurd power of that unique reward. However, a small detail in the structure of that valuable artifact catches his attention. Examining the piece very closely, the player notices something peculiar about the golden material. In the depths of the divine dungeon, the goddess in her normal form lay fallen on the cold floor. Slowly, the tutorial guide begins to regain consciousness, letting out groans of pain. She sits up on the stone floor, completely disoriented about where she ended up. Looking at her own hands, the divine entity feels a strange weakness course through her body. Soon, the memories return, and she understands that she gave in to her anger, completely losing her sanity. The sudden sound of dripping water pulls the deity from her dark thoughts. Soaking in the hall's sacred fountain, the young man waves calmly, asking if she finally woke up from that meltdown. The sacred entity's eyes widen, and she freaks out in anger at his audacity in her holy water. Super relaxed, the kid comments that the bath is great, and plays dumb in the face of her scolding. In the middle of her furious outburst, the deity freezes upon noticing the wide, open stone door. Her gaze shifts from the water where the young man was playing directly to the back of the forbidden sanctuary. On the luxurious pedestal, the divine box remained open, but the jewel was still in the exact same place. Confused by this unusual act, the goddess asks why he left such great power behind. Already dressed and walking through the hall, Yuman explains that he deduced it was a personal item of hers. The protagonist details that the jewel had signs of old use, disguised by extreme care. Touched by the sensitivity of this seemingly selfish kid, the entity silently places a hand on her chest. The goddess's mind travels back to the glorious days of old in the immense celestial gardens. The system shows the exact moment the great blacksmiths forged the sacred and indestructible pieces. Full of joy, the three deities celebrated the completion of the custom, made jewels for them. Joining their hands excitedly, the sisters showed off the new, unbreakable symbol of the strong bond they shared. Remembering these true bonds brings a nostalgic and warm smile to the lonely guide's face. As old memories flooded the room, she explains how that ring represented her precious times of freedom. The precious jewel rests in the goddess's hand, as she admits to having sealed the item because she thought she would never need it again. With a melancholic look, the guide laments that she would never wear that ring again anyway. Just then, the protagonist watches everything from the doorway and comments that she was forced to work as a tutorial guide. Recalling the dark days at the company, the young man confesses that he understands perfectly how exhausting that routine is. The sacred entity turns her head, completely surprised by the kid's unexpected empathy. Opening his arms in the middle of the hall, Yuma questions if it wouldn't be much better for her to try and have a little more fun. Super excited, he suggests crazy ideas like creating a hidden labyrinth, changing her look, or taking a walk outside. Extending a welcoming hand, the young man assures her that the possibilities for enjoying life are endless. With a gentle look, the player states that she doesn't have to remain bound by those rigid rules forever. Completely shocked by his liberating words, the deity feels a great weight lift from her shoulders. A calm smile appears on the guide's face as she agrees that the kid is completely right about life. Walking up to the young man, the goddess hands him the shining jewel and asks him to keep the legendary power. Surprised by the sudden gift, the protagonist hesitates a bit, but the guide insists it's alright. Filled with pure joy, she confesses that he reminded her of something important and insists on giving it to him. Soon after, Yuma puts the jewel on his finger, super satisfied, and promises to come back and visit soon. The sacred entity warns him to be careful, as the world outside is infested with dangerous enemies. Curious about the chaotic situation, the young man tries to find out how reality ended up merging like that. Regarding her own past, the goddess explains that she heard a mysterious voice and was suddenly ripped from the virtual world. Yuma processes the information, focusing on the detail of the strange voice, and thanks her for the important clue. Stretching his arms relaxedly, the protagonist concludes that for now, the best thing to do is just enjoy the journey. Agreeing with the idea, the guide flashes a radiant smile and promises she'll start living that way too. A few days later, the dungeon entrance is completely decked out with festive lights and decorations. A makeshift sign announces that the goddess has gone out for a stroll, leaving only a message of good luck for the newbies. Several players are outraged by the situation, complaining that the guide simply ditched her job to have fun. Back on the bustling streets, the kid walks calmly, enjoying the city breeze. The ghost spirit pops out of the magic ring, floating in the air, while Yuma wonders what his next destination will be. Noticing a big screen reporting the emergence of a new continent, he quickly decides he's going there. With his hands on his hips, the protagonist thinks that exploring an unknown land is the most fun option right now. Excited by his partner's attitude, the old spirit encourages him to keep playing in that free and untethered way. Completely swept up in the excitement, the young man agrees with a big smile, ready to face the world. Suddenly, the phone in the player's pocket starts ringing, catching his attention in the middle of the street. Looking at the device's screen, he recognizes the call is from Suwa, an old adventuring partner. On the other end of the line, his friend is yelling in complete desperation, begging for immediate help. Yuma breaks into a frantic sprint and asks what happened, hearing that his buddy is trapped in a dungeon. Hiding behind a rock, the young man whimpers, paralyzed with fear, swearing he's going to meet his end there. Passing through the portal to the indicated location, the protagonist announces he's arrived and asks for his friend's exact location. Along the way, he remembers that Suwa was an incredibly skilled player who was always at the top of the virtual rankings. Passing by some rocks, the kid thinks it's impossible for a veteran like him to be struggling in such a low-level area. With a very serious expression, the player wonders what kind of anomaly could have caused so much terror. Jumping from a considerable height, he inspects the rocky area, confirming that the difficulty is indeed low. As he runs through the red-lit caverns, Yuma can't understand the reason for all the desperation. Ludian appears out of nowhere, surprised by the rush, and soon hears that they need to rescue a partner in danger. Floating reflectively, the spirit questions whether old friendships will withstand this change in the world. Rejecting that pessimistic thought, the protagonist defends the trust he has in his relationship with his colleague. At that moment, he quickly turns his head, noticing a familiar silhouette huddled on the cavern floor. Spotting the huddled figure in the distance, the protagonist shouts in relief, having finally found his target. After landing softly on the ground, he calls out to his buddy to check on the situation, giving the scaredy cat a huge jump. Shaking badly, Suwa thanks the heavens for the help, while his friend wants to know what went wrong. His companion explains that he went in there, thinking it would be a very straightforward mission to handle. Extending a hand to help him up, the kid deduces that some new kind of monster must have appeared out of nowhere, contradicting the idea of an anomaly. His friend grabs Yuma's arm with his head down and states that the problem is something else. Not understanding a thing, the protagonist stares at his partner, completely confused by the mysterious answer. Putting his curiosity aside, he focuses on getting them both out of there, and suggests they fight together like old times. A memory from the past shows Suwa dressed as a knight, holding back a brutal attack with his immense shield. After the perfect block, Yuma's avatar would dash forward to take advantage of the enemy's huge opening. In a coordinated leap, the kid would deliver a fatal blow directly to the giant monster's head. Perfectly in sync, the two would high-five, celebrating another victory based on their flawless strategy. Back in the real dungeon, the player walks excitedly, commenting on how this situation brings back a ton of nostalgia. Suddenly, Suwa stops walking when he notices a peculiar object shining in the dark environment. Pointing forward, he alerts the protagonist to the lone treasure chest waiting for them. Eager for the reward, Yuma lifts the heavy lid of the box to reveal the spoils left in the area. The system emits a bluish glow and announces the acquisition of a fully enhanced longsword. Analyzing the floating screen, his friend is amazed by the high-level reinforced equipment. Holding the blade firmly, Suwa gets excited, feeling like he now has a fighting chance. The rest of the prize was just copper sand, a low-level material that his ally discards without a second thought. Picking up the vial from the ground, the protagonist decides to keep the sand, praising the ore's shiny texture. In the middle of their conversation, a startling boom makes both kids whip around. A demonic rock creature appears out of nowhere, roaring fiercely, ready to tear the intruders to pieces. Consumed by absolute panic, his companion abandons all courage and flees, crying in desperation. Taking the lead in the battle, Yuma tells him to stay calm and unleashes a swift, greenish slash against the beast. Trembling in the back of the cave, Suwa stammers a thank you as the monster turns into magical dust. Glancing back skeptically, the protagonist finally realizes that the veteran's cowardice makes no sense at all. Questioning what on earth has affected his mind, the two stop before a large, imposing wooden gate. Focused on getting out of there, the kid announces that they just need to clear the last challenge and asks if his companion is ready. With his palm flat, the player pushes the large, heavy door, revealing the direct path to the boss room. As soon as the large, heavy door opens, a monstrous boss with a stone carapace emerges in the dark hall. The beast lets out a terrifying roar, showing that the battle will be anything but friendly. Facing the enormous creature, Suwa freezes, completely terrified by the enemy's presence. But he tries to muster up some courage, shaking badly, and repeating to himself that he can handle this. Holding the new sword tightly, his friend charges forward, screaming, toward the giant adversary. Realizing the extreme recklessness, Yuma desperately yells for his colleague to wait. Without hearing the warning, the scaredy cat strikes with all his might, hoping to take down the boss for good. The impact, however, doesn't even tickle the creature's tough armor. In a brutal move, the monster retaliates, hitting the warrior dead on with its heavy claw. Suwa lets out a scream of pain as he's thrown far away by the force of the attack. The beast is already preparing its next blow, ready to crush the target lying on the stone floor. Seeing the fatal danger, the protagonist yells for his partner to be very careful. In a swift advance, the kid gets in front and blocks the claw using his own sword. Enduring the intense pressure, Yuma quickly checks if his companion is okay. Lying on the floor in shock, Suwa breaks down emotionally, thinking the weapon is useless and that the end has come. Frustrated, the kid wants to know what the problem is, since he expected them to fight together like in the old days. His companion yells back, confessing that he's terrified of all of this. Yuma is completely surprised by that sudden outburst of cowardice in the middle of the battle. Trembling and crying, his friend explains that he thought it would be just like the game, but reality is much worse. The enemies, seen up close, are immense and have a bizarre and very frightening smell. On top of that, carrying all that magical equipment is incredibly heavy on a real body. And to make matters worse, getting hit by these monsters actually hurts and causes a lot of damage. Suwa cries in despair, insisting that he can't fight under so much pressure anymore. Pinned in front of the colossal boss, the protagonist realizes things have gotten really bad. Gripping the hilt of his weapon tightly, he understands he needs to change tactics urgently. In a quick move, the kid throws the copper sand he found earlier straight onto the ground. The thick dust rises, creating a curtain that temporarily blinds and disorients the monster. Preparing his combat stance, Yuma tells his friend to hide so he can handle the problem alone. Watching from the sidelines, the old ghost praises the creative use of that material as a distraction. With a confident smile, Ludian comments that this playful style of battle is very good. Going on the offensive, the young man delivers a direct slash to the giant beast's arm. However, he soon realizes that the enemy's carapace is extremely hard, like real rock. His basic copper sword barely scratches the surface of that impenetrable natural armor. The floating spirit mocks the difficulty and questions how the kid plans to get through this defense. Quickly dodging an attack, the young man analyzes the boss's sharp claws and thick hide. He then concludes that there's a perfect skill to turn this game around in his favor. The colossal beast attacks with full force, forcing the protagonist to jump to avoid being crushed. From the back of the cave, Sua screams in desperation, warning that any mistake there will be fatal. Ignoring his friend's panic, Yuma raises his hand, emitting a strong light, and tells him to just watch. With a completely focused gaze and a firm stance, the player prepares for the decisive counterattack. The young man then loudly calls out the activation of his powerful mimicry skill. The interface appears, explaining that the power copies the target's characteristics for 15 seconds. Since common weapons don't work against that absurd defense, he decides to use the enemy's own strength. The magic envelopes the kid's arm, creating an exact copy of the creature's rocky and deadly claw. Faced with such a bizarre technique, even the monster recoils in shock, not understanding a thing. Without wasting time, the player charges forward, using the heavy copied claw as his new weapon. The two forces collide violently, generating a massive impact that shakes the entire hall. Holding back the pressure of the block, the kid notes that 15 seconds will be far too little to win. Trying to crush the defiant one once and for all, the beast raises both arms, letting out a roar. At that exact moment, the creature's vulnerable chest is left completely exposed in front of him. Seizing the valuable opening, Yuma releases the magical claw and breaks into a swift run. With a cry of determination, he focuses all his strength into a single piercing blow. The sword breaks through the monster's weak defense, spraying magical energy into the air. Hiding from afar, his cowardly partner watches the scene, completely amazed by the attack. The ghost spirit smiles proudly, confessing he was about to give a hint, but the kid figured it out on his own. As the boss turns to dust, Ludian is impressed by the quick mastery the kid has achieved. Adjusting his hat super satisfied, the protagonist celebrates that his risky strategy worked. The system glows, announcing that he has reached level 9 and unlocked the playful spirit technique. Outside the dungeon under the sun, the duo breathes a sigh of relief for having escaped that inferno alive. Excited, the kid suggests they continue fighting together, but Sua announces he's going to quit being a player. The protagonist blinks, very confused, unable to process such a defeatist attitude. Sitting on the rocks facing the landscape, the young man remembers they were always a perfect duo. In his mind, the memories of the game were full of laughter and strategies that overcame any challenge. With his head down, Sua is very sincere in confessing that his fear of pain simply speaks louder. His partner admits that the experience in the cave proved he wasn't cut out for real battles. Feeling the great weight of that farewell, Yuma just looks at his colleague with an understanding gaze. The ex-warrior tries to lighten the mood, saying he found it very thrilling to see his friend having fun. Getting up to leave, he announces he's just going to look for regular games to relax in safely. Accepting his cowardly companion's sad choice, the protagonist affirms that he understands his side. Curious, Sua changes the subject and asks what the young adventurer's next steps will be. With his eyes shining with pure excitement, Yuma reveals that he wants to explore the lands of the new continent. Fiddling with his phone, his colleague remembers seeing a recent ad recruiting teams for that region. As he shows the device's screen, the hatted kid gets super anxious about this great opportunity. Turning his back, Sua warns in a very serious tone that he'll never forgive his friend if he ends up perishing. Yuma gives a gentle smile, and the two fist bump in a quick farewell, ending their old partnership. Watching his friend wave from a distance, the protagonist is left alone on the hill, staring at the horizon. He focuses on his phone, reading the official government article about recruitment for the new continent. The publication highlights the approved guilds, including the famous Glorious Falcon, led by men in suits. The kid notices that the minimum requirement is level 15 and realizes he'll need to level up a lot. Clenching his fist firmly, he also concludes that he'll need much stronger equipment for the test. With that in mind, the best option to get high-level items quickly is to explore a treasure dungeon. Since the registration deadline is in just 2 days, the player tells himself he needs to hurry. Far away, the imposing headquarters of a gigantic corporation cuts through the city skyline. The building's sign identifies the location as the headquarters of the Takashiro Corporation. Inside the building, a tense meeting is taking place in the large boardroom. Sitting at the head of the table, President Shoya announces he will name the members with the lowest contribution rates. The employees listen in silence, maintaining a rigid posture under the pressure imposed by the guild leader. The bright screen displays the bottom of the internal ranking, highlighting the names Okiyama and Yoshi. Staring coldly at the targets, the suited man calls out the two employees publicly. Without a shred of mercy, Shoya expels the young men from the guild and the company, leaving the duo in a complete panic. Waving his hand arrogantly, The leader complains that their hunt numbers were a complete failure. The boss's severe gaze makes it crystal clear that people incapable of meeting quotas are just useless trash. With his hands on the table, he warns the other members that there is no future in the company for complacent employees. Finally, Shoya demands that everyone take the next treasure dungeon raid very seriously. Hearing the oppressive speech, the blonde girl clutches her skirt, frustrated at being only in third place. She feels extremely indignant as she sacrificed even her sleep trying to reach the top of the ranking. Focused on her goal, the employee promises herself she'll need to work even harder on missions. Turning his back to the team, the president reflects that in a chaotic world, those who act first dominate everything. An ambitious smile appears on the leader's face, convinced he will do whatever it takes to achieve his grand ideal. Meanwhile, the protagonist watches an interview with this same suited man on his phone screen. In the video, the businessman claims that his corporation will take over clearing the dungeons to save Japan. Taking a calm step, the young adventurer finally crosses the portal of the treasure dungeon. Right at the entrance, he finds a group of armed players exchanging gunfire and explosions with the local monsters. Observing the commotion from a distance, the kid's gaze is drawn to a specific creature in the middle of the hall. A treasure-hunting zombie with a tattered hat walks slowly through the darkness of the ruins. Analyzing the undead, Yuma draws his sword, remembering that the creature only stops moving if its head is crushed. Suddenly, a very powerful shot rips through the air and hits the monster directly in the skull. The blonde girl sighs, lowering her giant sniper rifle after successfully taking down the target. Ignoring her surroundings, she adjusts the weapon, thinking only that she still needs to eliminate many more monsters to meet her quota. Just then, the protagonist's eyes widen as he notices another creature appearing behind her and yells a warning. In an incredibly swift advance, the kid dashes past the sniper and delivers a precise green slash to the stealthy enemy. The young woman blinks, completely surprised by the rapid movement that just happened beside her. Sheathing his sword, Yuma asks if she's okay, but the sniper just grumbles irritably. Snapping, the girl tells the adventurer to stop stealing her kills, as hitting her quota is essential for her. The protagonist lets out a confused sigh, not understanding the reason for such rudeness after he just saved her life. This proud young woman is Najika Natsume, one of the most dedicated members of the military guild, Glorious Falcon. Staring at the kid menacingly, she just repeats the warning for him not to interfere in other people's fights. With a hand on his head, the player explains himself in a relaxed way, assuring her he was just trying to help. Suddenly, a suited employee shouts from a distance, telling the sniper to stop dawdling and get back to work. Najika responds immediately with great obedience and runs to rejoin the rest of the team in the hall. Watching the team move away, Yuma finds it bizarre to see players acting like mere corporate slaves grinding to meet a quota. Floating beside him, the ghost asks if the kid wasn't in a hurry, but he says he'd rather enjoy the scenery. Enchanted by the setting, the young man admires the blue fire torches hanging on the ruined walls. Sliding his hand over the ancient carved stones, he decides he's going to enjoy the exploration at his own pace. The old spirit smiles, satisfied, praising how his partner has truly embraced the freestyle of a player. Further down the corridor, the guild team comes across a large group of monsters blocking the passage. Without wasting time, the suited men fire their weapons, and Najika locks her sights on her target with total focus. The squad leader orders no one to fall behind, warning that they need to take down all the enemies on that floor. Walking very slowly, the protagonist just follows behind the group, watching the corporate slaughter. Taking a deep breath, the kid comments excitedly that he loves the smell of rust and the dark atmosphere of this place. Suddenly, a small anomaly on the stone floor catches the adventurer's curious attention. He crouches down to investigate the area, leaving the ghost confused about what the young man is doing standing there. Examining the spot with great attention, Yuma finally notices a peculiar secret about the dungeon structure. Meanwhile, the military squad reaches the large double doors and discovers the coveted treasure room. Opening the shining chests, the suited men celebrate the great high-level rewards they just found. Taking care of his share of the loot, one of the employees opens a small wooden chest, completely disappointed. He holds up an old, oddly shaped dagger, complaining with great disgust about the useless item he found. Furious with his bad luck, the man throws the weapon on the ground, claiming that piece of junk is trash. In a quick move, Yuma runs over and catches the discarded equipment in mid-air with great ease. Twirling the curved blade in his hand, the kid finds the design quite interesting and useful for various tricks. The suited men laugh in his face, mocking that they'd rather fight bare-handed than use that thing. Shrugging, the protagonist states that strong weapons go to the fastest and promises to grab the main prize. Smiling at the crooked dagger, the young adventurer reflects that the power of a piece of equipment greatly depends on the skill of the one who wields it. Later in the large, greenish hall, the guild continues to clear the map with heavy explosions and gunfire. Advancing alongside them, Yuma also joins the fray, using his newest bizarre little knife. In an agile spin, the kid slices through enemies, commenting that the blade's crooked weight makes the attacks quite fun. Finishing the combat in the area, the military men run together toward the secret entrance of the Great Boss's chamber. However, without paying proper attention to the dark floor, one of the men ends up stepping directly on a loose block. The dungeon's mechanism reacts instantly, revealing enormous metal teeth sprouting from the ground. The bear trap snaps shut, crushing the employee's leg, who roars in pain under the desperate gaze of his team. Desperate with his leg trapped, the suited man begs Natsume for help. The sniper readily agrees and starts looking for a switch to deactivate that cursed trap. Just then, a sinister red glow suddenly appears in the darkness of the ruins. A gigantic stone guardian lands heavily on the scene, blocking the team's path. Completely surprised, the girl realizes that creature is the main security for the floor's boss. Without wasting time, she readies her bow and fires a luminous arrow with all her strength at the enemy. The attack hits the monster's tough armor, scattering sparks through the air without causing any damage. The young woman is frustrated to see that the blow had no effect whatsoever on the rock. Staring at the target's firm stance, she deduces that the enemy was built with a focus on absolute defense. Clenching her own weapon tensely, the girl is at a loss, not having enough firepower. Making matters worse, the glowing button to release the trap is located right behind the armored monster. Observing the scene calmly, the kid concludes that the goal is simply to hit that red switch. Holding the crooked dagger, Yuma adjusts his hat, full of confidence, and tells the sniper to leave the job to him. Agonizing on the floor, the employee calls the young man crazy, doubting that a defective weapon is good for anything. Floating beside them, Ludian scoffs at their ignorance while the adventurer agrees, finding it quite amusing. With his magic activated, the crooked dagger begins to emit a strong glow, affirming that even that piece of junk has its use. The skill extracts the item's true potential, transforming the blade into a swift boomerang. Seeing that intense light appear out of nowhere, the sniper is completely shocked. On the floor, the suited man also doesn't understand how the kid made that happen. Excited by the turn of events, the old ghost encourages his partner to show what he's really capable of. In a perfect throw, the projectile swerves around the monster and hits the switch relentlessly before returning. Deactivated by the mechanism, the stone giant loses its strength and crumbles inert in the middle of the path. At the same time, the iron jaws of the trap spring open, releasing the employee's injured leg. The blonde's eyes widen, impressed by the absurd precision that solved both problems at once. Catching his weapon back in the air, the adventurer comments that he had already figured there would be defenses in the area. Turning his back, the kid calmly explains that he's been analyzing the environment since he got there. Holding up the glowing dagger, Yuma proves that even discarded equipment deserves a chance to show its worth. Behind him, the duo from the corporate guild remains frozen on the stone floor, still processing what happened. The girl runs to her injured partner to check on his condition, hearing the man curse his own lack of attention. Clenching his bruised fist on the cold floor, the employee laments that failing here will get him kicked out of the guild. Consumed by corporate panic, the man is terrified at the idea of losing his job and being left adrift. He tries to crawl, swearing he needs to meet his quota even while injured to get at least one rare item, but the excruciating pain in his injured leg makes him collapse, letting out a groan of suffering. Holding her colleague's shoulder, the sniper tries to calm him down, assuring him he can't move in his condition. With a dark and determined look, Natsume realizes that all the responsibility has now fallen on her. Full of attitude, the girl guarantees she will take over the mission and take down the final boss, even if she has to fight alone. With no other choice, her injured partner accepts her help, placing all his hope in her. Gripping her bow firmly, the blonde promises to fulfill the objective in the name of the corporation's ideals. Watching the scene up close, Yuma can't understand this blind loyalty to a company. Inspecting the blood on the iron trap, the kid is thankful that at least the injury wasn't fatal. Turning his head in confusion, he questions what the young woman's real objective is, risking so much. In a very serious tone, the adventurer reminds her that they are on a battlefield, betting their own lives. Completely focused on the mission, Natsume tells him to get out of her way, stating she has a great duty to fulfill. The young man retorts ironically, asking if this glorious duty is just a hunting quota imposed by her boss. Ignoring the taunt, the employee defends that everyone's sacrifice serves to achieve a much greater ideal. Hearing that word, Yuma remembers with disgust his old company, where they forced him to shout motivational phrases. Standing before the boss's gate, the blonde reveals that their leader promised to create a new world, and that's why she won't hesitate. A look of pure determination dominates the young sniper's face. Advancing into danger, Natsume swears to give her own life to prove herself worthy of this grand vision. Recognizing the name, the protagonist recalls seeing the suited man giving an interview on the city's big screens. Remembering the dark old office makes the kid doubt if her fanatical loyalty is really healthy. With a powerful boom, the immense double doors swing wide open, revealing the final chamber. The girl enters with firm steps into a gigantic hall filled with deadly traps on the floor. In the center of the room, a mechanical monster awaited, surrounded by chains and flying spiked balls. The cybernetic beast displays a single, glowing green eye, swinging its heavy clubs. Inspecting the enemy, Yuma deduces that the Guardian relentlessly attacks anyone who seeks the treasure. Leaping swiftly between the traps, Natsume tells the kid to pay attention instead of narrating the obvious. A colossal gear whizzes through the air, nearly hitting the intruders in the hall. Showing great agility, the employee dodges the barbed pendulums and gains some distance. Sliding across the stone floor, she readies her bow and focuses her aim completely on the central target. Ignoring the arrows, the mechanical guardian launches its heavy spiked club in a brutal attack. The sniper jumps back, narrowly dodging, and realizes the chaotic movement prevents her from aiming properly. Running right behind, the protagonist complains that the girl is acting recklessly again. The kid notices that the numerous chains from the ceiling block the path, making it impossible to use his boomerang. Changing his plan, Yuma dashes into the center of the chaos, stating he'll have to resort to another method. Cornered by the deadly pendulums, the blonde gasps, feeling the weight of the challenge, and starts to doubt herself. Trying to keep her composure, she turns back and tells her partner to stop mumbling to himself in the middle of the fight. A huge shadow covers the young woman's body as the giant monster silently appears behind her. The creature's steel punch hits the ground with absurd violence, creating a cloud of dust. Thrown far by the indirect impact, Natsume coughs, feeling the overwhelming force of that enemy firsthand. The cyborg swings its heavy weapon, ready to finish off the weakened target on the dark floor. Ignoring her own pain, the girl clenches her teeth, insisting that she must win at all costs. The beast raises its gigantic club, blocking the employee's view before the fatal blow. In a swift leap, the adventurer grabs the blonde and pulls her away the exact moment the floor is destroyed. Holding Natsume in his arms, Yuma gives her a furious scolding, reminding her that he had already told her to get out of his way. Held by the adventurer, the blonde still insists she needs to keep fighting for her ideal. He holds the girl firmly, dodges the heavy attack, and assures her he has everything under control. Taking advantage of the movement, Yuma throws his magic dagger to cut the ropes of a trap on the ceiling. The large stone block plummets, nearly hitting the cyborg, creating the perfect opening the young man wanted. Immediately, he grabs the employee's wrist and tells her it's the exact time to act. Without a second thought, the kid breaks into a frantic run across the hall, carrying the sniper. Furious at being dragged, Natsume tells him to let her go, cursing his cowardly act of running from the fight. Floating mockingly, the ghost laughs at her ignorance while the protagonist tells her to just watch. At the end of the dark corridor, the stone giant stops and focuses its attention on the two fleeing intruders. The creature's mechanical eye glows intensely, indicating the target has been successfully locked. Looking over her shoulder, the girl panics, noticing the deadly machine hot on their heels. Desperate, she warns her partner that the Guardian relentlessly pursues intruders. With his face hidden by the shadow of his hat, the adventurer gives a cunning smile and agrees. At that exact moment, the monster steps on a false slab and is brutally hit by the hall's own traps. The sniper's eyes widen, shocked by the intelligence of that perfect ambush. Taking heavy damage, the cyborg stares at the targets as it tries to process what's happening. Trapped in a cycle of pain, the beast is torn apart by the blades as Yuma reveals he sabotaged the place. During his initial exploration, the kid used his knowledge of the layout to reprogram the deadly mechanisms. In an ironic tone, he concludes that using the traps against their own master is the best kind of justice. Overcoming the attack, the monster lets out a deafening roar and unleashes a magical aura to break free. The sniper focuses her vision and deduces that the source of all that energy comes directly from the green eye. Readying her bow, Natsume puts her pride aside and agrees to coordinate a simultaneous strike with the kid. The employee draws the bowstring, gathering a massive amount of power in her magical arrows. In a brutal shot, the luminous blasts cross the hall, tearing through the air toward the enemy. With cover secured, the protagonist runs swiftly in the same direction as the projectiles. The attack explodes right in the Guardian's face, temporarily blinding the creature. In the middle of his charge, the adventurer nearly bumps into the ghost spirit and complains about him getting in the way. Absolutely furious, the monster swings its giant club and hurls the heavy weapon blindly down the corridor. The impact splits the stone floor, creating a violent boom that shakes the entire dungeon. Escaping the blow by a hair's breadth, Yuma announces that this is the definitive moment to end the fight. Following the perfect advance, the blonde cheers, feeling that the target is exposed. With an incredible leap, Yuma pierces the cyborg's magic eye, generating a devastating beam of light. Without its energy source, the Guardian's heavy body crumbles into pieces, turning into scrap on the floor. The kid wipes the sweat from his brow, sighing in relief, while Natsume tries to calm her own nerves. Surprised by the bizarreness, Ludian confesses he doesn't know if their chemistry is genius or a disaster. Celebrating hard, the adventurer clenches his fists, excited to see the panel confirming he's reached level 15. Immediately, a blinding light begins to emanate from the destroyed enemy's remains. A floating energy catches the young man's attention, and he walks slowly to check out the reward. The sniper is shocked to realize the boss dropped an item of extreme rarity. The system screen glows, announcing the acquisition of a rapier capable of ignoring defenses and piercing magic. Admiring the legendary sword, Yuma concludes that his special class has finally paid off. The young woman's gaze focuses on the valuable equipment, and she seems to reflect on her companion's strength. Regaining her focus, the employee remembers that the mission's objective is in the treasure chamber and moves on. Before the heavy doors of the hall, Natsume enters the sealed area, ready to collect the prize. Concentrated on her duty, she quickly kneels down and opens the lid of the ancient chest. The screen glows, confirming the acquisition of an enhanced spike club for the employee. Grabbing the heavy equipment, the girl sighs in relief for having met the required quota of 10 weapons. Now in the exit corridors, Natsume swallows her pride and sincerely thanks him for the vital help. With a hand on his hip, the kid changes the subject and asks if she actually had fun in there. The memory of the beast being crushed by its own traps makes the young man question if that wasn't exciting. The blonde lowers her head, confused, having never thought of a deadly battle as something fun. Stretching his arms, Yuma advises his partner to let go of all that corporate rigidity. Relaxed, the adventurer assures her it's perfectly normal to enjoy life and play for fun. Reaching the illuminated exit, the protagonist waves excitedly and says goodbye before disappearing into the portal. Natsume's face darkens as she murmurs that freedom is a useless concept. With a clenched fist, she repeats the mantra of living only to realize her boss's grand vision. However, the young sniper can't forget that fascinating and free style of fighting. The scene quickly cuts to the large sign identifying the luxurious boardroom at the company. Analyzing the reports, the president coldly praises the employee for meeting her quota, demanding more focus. With a document in hand, the leader informs her that she will pass the new continent's exam without fail. Manipulatively, the suited man orders the blonde to keep an eye on the strange player, as he could be useful in the future. With her head bowed before her superior, the employee simply nods, accepting yet another secret mission. On the day of the event, a military base was set up in the open fields to receive candidates from all over the country. Walking among the participants, Yuma confesses to being nervous about the test, but very excited for the adventure. On a makeshift stage, the examiner welcomes the elite adventurers who met the requirements. The man warns that the emergence of this unexplored continent is something that never existed in the game. Paying close attention to the speech, the warriors understand that the region may harbor entirely new races and monsters. The examiner reinforces that the danger will be absurd, and any diplomatic failure will lead to certain demise. Because of this, the government will select only 10 prodigies to form the official exploration team. Holding up its fingers, the examiner explains that the selection will have a written exam, resource gathering, and a simulated battle. However, the first rule of the test requires everyone to immediately find a partner to form a duo. The protagonist freezes on the lawn, surprised by this sudden cooperative requirement. The giant timer shows 5 minutes as the examiner warns that anyone left alone will be disqualified. A drop of sweat runs down the kid's face as he realizes the pressure to team up is already the first test. Frantic in the middle of the crowd, Yuma knows he needs to find someone strong before time runs out. Searching hurriedly across the field, the protagonist focuses on a specific target. Getting the attention of a peculiar kid, Yuma asks directly if he wants to team up. Narumi Kyosuke sizes the kid up and down and decides he doesn't look like he can handle the job. Rejected by the short guy, the adventurer spots a strong warrior standing further away. However, he freezes when he realizes someone else has already approached the warrior first. A man with the air of an executive blocks the way, acting completely superior. Yuma backs off, feeling the guy's intimidating presence. Shimada Kippei shows off for his floating camera, mocking what kind of partner a court jester would make. Just then, the final warning echoes across the field, announcing only 1 minute left on the clock. Desperation hits the kid hard as he realizes it would be pathetic to be disqualified for not finding anyone. Looking around frantically, he understands he can't just pick someone at random either, until his eyes land on an unmistakable blonde girl standing alone on the grass. Recognizing Natsume Najika from the Glorious Falcon Guild, he runs over, relieved. The young woman confirms the pairing, saving the kid in the final seconds of the test. Thrilled with his luck, Yuma smiles, stating he's really looking forward to working together again. The two walk together across the open field toward the next stage of the selection. Yuma tries to make some casual conversation, cutting the mood instantly. Natsume coldly informs him that she's not there to make friends. The sniper makes it clear she will just observe the entire test and use him as a tool if she finds it convenient. Soon after, all the candidates are seated at separate desks for the dreaded written exam. The protagonist stares at the question sheet, scratching his head, completely lost. He grips his pencil, sweating bullets, faced with absurdly complex content. Meanwhile, his partner answers everything with great ease and absolute focus. After the time limit, the examiner announces on the big screen that everyone below 20 first place is eliminated. Yuma clasps his hands in a silent prayer, hoping for a true miracle. The screen flashes, showing he barely passed in 19th place, securing the duo's spot. Natsume is stunned, demanding to know how on earth he managed to pass. The blonde questions this because the test had ridiculous questions in French and about protocols no one had ever seen before. Embarrassed, the kid confesses that he just guessed all the options that seemed the most fun. Above them, the screen highlights the number 1 duo at the top, formed by Kiria Soma and Shino Izui. The other participants whisper excitedly about the sensational duo leading the city's sponsorship rumors. The 2 warriors in white armor walk together, displaying great confidence in their own abilities. Observing the strong competition, the sniper warns that they can't let their guard down for a second. The protagonist thinks this tense talk of risking their lives is an exaggeration and asks her to relax a bit. In front of a huge cave, the examiner announces the start of the Great Field Collection test. The enclosed labyrinth is known for distorting the sense of direction and time of those who venture too deep. The main mission is to collect 3 natural gems that randomly materialize in the rocks. The participants rush into the darkness, wanting to secure an early advantage. The examiner tells them not to forget that the place also serves as a lair infested with monsters. Finally, he wishes them luck and tells everyone to dive headfirst into the danger. Already in the rocky tunnels, the duo finds the first sphere glowing in a corner of the path. Holding the colorful gem, the kid celebrates their great start. Focused on the final goal, the employee tells them to speed up the search for the next 2 items. They continue exploring the dark corridors, staying on high alert for possible threats in the gloom. Sliding his hand along the stone walls, Yuma notices a very subtle magical trail. He quickly deduces that the deeper into the cave, the stronger and more colorful this magic becomes. Pointing to the adjacent tunnel, the kid suggests they follow the trail to find the source of this power. Suddenly, his partner stops walking and focuses her vision on a specific spot on the rock. She points upward, announcing she's found another gem perfectly embedded in the rock. Excited by their success, Yuma claims that breaking that small barrier from a distance will be a piece of cake. Before acting, the 2 notice other people approaching in the tunnel. The famous top-ranked couple appears, realizing they've lost the race for the gem there. Without causing any useless friction, the warriors turn back and go look elsewhere. Natsume praises their fair attitude, noting that they rely only on their own strength and not a title. Using his magic with precision, the protagonist shatters the barrier, knocking the prize loose. Catching the sphere in mid-air, the girl confirms the success of the second collection. Satisfied with the time to spare, the adventurer guarantees they'll pass the test with flying colors. In another isolated area of the cave, the unlikely duo of Narumi and Shimada walk somewhat aimlessly. The cameraman films their journey, complaining about his short partner, as he'd rather be with the attractive blonde warrior. In the middle of his arrogant grumbling, a mysterious little blue monster pops out of the ground, surprising them both. The electric creature lets out a shrill roar, attacking Narumi, who panics desperately. The cameraman loves the real danger and moves the camera closer, asking if his companion is going to kick the bucket right there. Sweating bullets from the attack, the short guy begs for help, yelling for him to hurry up. In a calm advance, Shimada pulls out a heavy light shield and blocks the shock with total ease. Fallen and panting, the little guy thanks the heavens for the second rescue. Shimada laughs, confessing that the look of terror almost made for wonderful footage for the audience. He puts the camera away, complaining that he wanted to film just a little more of the other's agony. Changing focus, the suited man points out that they still haven't found much along the way. The duo's only gem was found right at the entrance, and Narumi thinks there must be a faster collection method. Completely lost in the labyrinth, Shimada warns that if they keep messing around, they'll be disqualified soon. The short guy throws a fit, refusing the embarrassing possibility of failing such a simple phase. Focused on turning the situation around, he comes up with a rather dirty idea. Getting Shimada's attention, Narumi asks him to listen to his grand plan. The 2 huddle in a dark corner to whisper about the trap they plan to set. The man with the shield agrees with a wicked smile, showing his full approval of the strategy. Walking calmly through the cave, Yuma suddenly stops and looks back upon hearing a strange sound. A desperate scream echoes through the stone tunnels, putting the kid on high alert. Concerned about helping, the adventurer alerts his partner and prepares to run in that direction. Further ahead, the short Narumi is surrounded by electric monsters, screaming in pure terror. Arriving on the scene, the kid notices the gravity of the situation and states they need to act fast. Without a second's hesitation, Yuma draws his sword, ready for the imminent combat. In a swift advance, he dashes past the sniper, heading straight for the blue beasts. Now safe, the short guy takes a deep breath and thanks him for the help, pretending he just accidentally let his guard down. Relieved to have arrived in time, the protagonist asks where his companion went. But at that exact moment, a huge shadow suddenly appears right behind the rescued kid. With a completely wicked look, Narumi gives the signal for the cowardly ambush to begin. The trap springs quickly as the short guy uses a stealth ability to snatch the gems from the adventurer's pouch. Yuma reacts with surprise, noticing the items have vanished from his waist in the blink of an eye. Furious at the disgusting betrayal, Natsume yells, demanding that the trash give back what he just stole. Before she could finish her sentence, The blonde is brutally hit by the heavy shield of the suited Shimada. The violent impact sends both adventurers plummeting into a dark abyss in the cave. As they fall, the short guy praises his burly partner's brute force for the perfect move. Standing at the edge of the cliff, Shimada laughs at how easy it was to trick those two helpful idiots. Satisfied with the theft, the short guy guarantees that now they'll be able to pass the test in first place. Down below in the darkness, the employee grinds her teeth in anger for not having anticipated a thieving skill. Staring at the stone walls, the protagonist warns that if they stay trapped there, they'll be disqualified for sure. Acting with great speed, the sniper pulls her partner by the hand to help him climb the rough rocks. The kid thanks her for the support and states they need to run hard to catch up with the wretched traitors. Full of determination, the duo breaks into a frantic and furious run through the stone tunnels. Suddenly, the kid's eyes widen as he notices something completely unexpected up ahead. In an immediate reflex, he tells his partner to stop and blocks the path with his arm. Confused by the abrupt stop, Natsume tries to understand what's catching his attention in the hall. Before them, the two swindlers from before appear huddled on the ground, trembling with terror. Surrounded by magical ice spikes, the short guy begs for help, whimpering in desperation. The threat reveals itself as an immense crystal golem, displaying a deadly and impenetrable energy. With an extremely cold look, the employee questions if this is just another dirty little act from that duo. Crying nonstop, the short guy swears on everything holy that this time the danger is very real. Watching the suited man retreat in terror from the beast, Yuma reflects that he understands the distrust, but the situation seems critical. Staring at the little thief's desperate face, the protagonist sighs and decides to intervene in the combat anyway. The sniper turns her head, completely indignant at her teammate's naivety. Annoyed, Natsume asks if he's lost his mind, but the kid just smiles, saying he wants to trust them. Maintaining a firm stance, he warns that turning their backs now would certainly result in the duo's demise. Drawing his sword, which emits an intense glow, the adventurer states he'd rather be played for a fool than let someone perish. Realizing she won't be able to change his stubborn mind, the blonde just sighs in defeat. Joining the fight, she aims her bow and warns that she'll be collecting the gems back as soon as the job is done. The short guy is completely perplexed to find that someone would actually help them after such a betrayal. Noticing the excited smile on Yuma's face, the thief doesn't understand how the kid can be enjoying all this danger. Completely amazed by the heroic scene, Narumi starts looking at the adventurer with extreme respect. Charging into the offensive, Yuma unleashes a very swift, greenish slash against the crystalline beast. From the back of the rocky hall, the short guy yells a warning that not even his strong companion could scratch that thing. Understanding the message about the enemy's tough armor perfectly, Yuma prepares to focus on the best strategy. He quickly switches equipment, wielding his newly acquired magic rapier with total confidence. That legendary sword has the exact characteristic needed to ignore any defense as hard as rock. Meanwhile, Natsume draws her bowstring, promising to draw all the gigantic golem's attention. A volley of luminous arrows cuts swiftly through the air, heading straight for the crystal target. The monster raises both rocky arms, trying to defend itself from the sudden magical impact. Seizing the perfect opening in its guard, the protagonist leaps high to attack the enemy directly from above. The rapier's thin blade easily penetrates the rough carapace, proving its devastating effectiveness. Excited to see the armor crack, the kid lands nimbly, telling his partner the plan is flowing perfectly. With his feet back on the cave floor, he focuses on the smaller monsters trying to surround the area. Suddenly, the adventurer gets distracted and notices too late a dangerous attack coming directly from his side. A sharp ice spike advances dangerously, aimed right at the kid's unprotected face. In an unexpected reflex, Narumi jumps in front and uses his heavy backpack to block the deadly blow. With a slightly smug smile, the short guy proves that he can be useful in the middle of a battle like that too. The protagonist bursts out laughing and quickly praises the little thief's great courage for just saving his skin. Without losing the fight's momentum, Yuma jumps back, gracefully dodging a new formation of crystals. The adventurer's gaze changes, becoming extremely focused and grim to finish off this annoying threat once and for all. Far away, the suited man also gets back in the fight and smashes one of the ice monsters with his giant shield. Trying to regain some lost pride, Shimada claims he had only let his guard down for a moment before, landing lightly right behind his proud ally. The hatted kid thanks him for the essential cover in combat. In a clean and very powerful move, Yuma splits the last great crystal guardian exactly in half. The enemy's magical body can't withstand the damage and explodes into a cloud of dust and small, shining fragments. Surrounded by a soft light, the kid extends his hand to his companions, calmly assuring them that the nightmare is over. The short guy's shining eyes widen, and he begins to cry with pure admiration for the hero of the sword. Completely regretful, the short guy bows, swearing to follow the kid as his boss for the rest of his life. Sitting on her backpack with a very grumpy expression, the employee mutters, making it clear she hasn't forgiven the betrayal at all. Suddenly, the blonde's attention is drawn to a mysterious purple glow coming from the debris on the floor. Holding the luminous sphere, She realizes with utter shock that this is the exact item from the mission. Yuma deduces that the beasts were using the ores as a power source and notes that they took down 3 giant enemies there. Gathering all the magical spheres with a huge smile, the kid cheers, relieved that they completed the objective just before time ran out. Back at the entrance of the large cave, the survivors gather to hear the next steps. Holding a megaphone, the examiner announces that the 12 duos approved in the collection will proceed to the simulated battle. Walking through the area, Natsume celebrates their success while the examiner tells everyone to get ready. Just then, Yuma notices a girl crying heavily in a corner and asks another candidate what happened. The young man explains that her partner got lost and ended up being brutally taken out by a monster. Trying to console the shaken young woman, the famous warrior in white armor says her partner fought well. Kiriyasoma bows his head, swearing he tried to save him but unfortunately arrived too late. In tears, the girl assures him it wasn't his fault, completely ignoring the warrior's dark gaze. The man focuses on his own blood-stained hand and agrees in a macabre tone that he is truly sorry. However, the raw truth is that Kiriya was the one responsible for slicing up the other participant without mercy. Maintaining a cruel fake smile, the supposed hero keeps his good guy mask perfectly intact. Soon after, all the approved candidates are taken to the entrance of a gigantic traditional temple. The examiner resumes, asking for the participants' full attention for the final stage. With great formality, he officially declares the start of the final exam for the adventurers. The man explains that since the new continent demands brute force, the test is to defeat powerful bosses right there. The glowing panel projects the images of the 4 fearsome beast generals guarding the hall. To secure the coveted spot, the examiner announces that only the 5 teams with the most damage points will be approved. Natsume swallows hard, remembering that these monsters require at least level 30 to be faced. Suddenly, Yuma observes the famous couple passing by with their enormous white sword on display. Inspecting the weapon from afar, the kid notices fresh bloodstains that make no sense there. A terrible suspicion takes hold of the protagonist as he deduces what those 2 really did in the cave. Inside the divine sanctuary, the groups face 4 immense gates blocking the path. Standing before the fire room, Kiriya politely asks who would like to help them clear the area. Several candidates begin to whisper excitedly at the chance to fight alongside the number 1. Assessing the situation, the sniper suggests they avoid the elite duo as they are on very different levels. The blonde prefers to focus on weaker targets to ensure a safe progression in the survival exam. Ignoring his partner, the adventurer raises his hand suddenly, leaving Natsume completely shocked. With firm steps, he moves forward, asking to join Kiriya's team in the raid on the main gate. The protagonist displays a calculated look, claiming he's quite curious about the warrior's methods. Masking his true intentions, the suited man in armor accepts the help with a big, friendly smile. Inside the sealed chamber, the great fire general roars fiercely at the intruders. Analyzing the beast, Kiriya comments that the creature is tough and suggests they use their usual tactic. Immediately, his partner charges forward, swinging a colossal hammer with absurd force. Very calmly, the warrior notes that the wolf dodged, but that was already part of the trap. An intense flash explodes from the ground, catching the swift creature completely by surprise during its dodge. Stunned by the magical light, the fire monster freezes while the woman celebrates the plan's success. Kiriya praises his companion's great work and draws his white sword to finish the heavy lifting. Unleashing a brutal cutting skill, the warrior splits the incandescent wolf in half without difficulty. Sheathing his weapon, the suited man lets out a relieved sigh, stating that the victory was very quick and easy. Watching everything from a distance, Yuma finds it strange how efficient they are but show no joy in their victory. Natsume is stunned by their perfect coordination, admitting they didn't even need to help at all. A murderous glint appears in the warrior's eyes as he announces that now is the right time to act. The protagonist's instincts go off instantly, realizing the real danger has just begun. In the blink of an eye, the sound of steel clashing violently echoes throughout the stone chamber. The sniper's eyes widen in complete shock as she witnesses the cowardly betrayal happening right in front of her. The violent impact throws Natsume backward while Yuma crosses his sword, blocking the deadly blow. Straining hard, the kid tries to withstand the absurd pressure of the enemy's heavy blade without faltering. With a perverse smile, the fake hero praises the adventurer's quick reflexes for not perishing on the spot. Maintaining a defensive stance, Yuma accuses the 2 of being nothing more than player killers looking for blood. Hearing that terrible revelation, the sniper freezes, unable to believe the nightmare unfolding. Spinning her heavy hammer, the psychopathic woman laughs, saying the real fun has just begun. Indignant at the absurd situation, the adventurer questions what's so fun about slaughtering other innocent participants. Kiriya just returns the question, wanting to know what kind of fun there is in slicing up simple, empty monsters. In a sadistic tone, the villain explains that the real pleasure lies in seeing the terrified expressions of his begging victims. His companion hugs herself, thrilled, eager to see the fear in the eyes of this new duo. Being a complete cynic, the fake hero claims the new continent would be dangerous anyway. Opening his arms arrogantly, he argues that the world changed so they could play however they want. Annoyed by this twisted logic, the old ghost spirit mutters, cursing the murderous duo as trash. Ludian completely condemns their attitude of stealing people's futures for sheer, sick cruelty. The kid adjusts his hat, agreeing with his partner, and firmly states that this is no way to play a game. Bathed in a magical light, the kid argues that playing for real is about expanding possibilities. The floating old spirit fully agrees, remembering that adventures broaden everyone's future. Full of pride, Ludian gives a confident smile, knowing he chose the perfect partner to guide on this journey. Preparing a major counterattack, the protagonist concentrates a strong, greenish magic in his free hand. In a sudden move, Yuma finally manages to push the murderous warrior back, gaining a lot of space. The fake hero raises an eyebrow, finding the punk's sudden resistance quite interesting. With fire in his eyes, the young adventurer activates his powerful secret mimicry skill to turn the tables. A shining copy of the enemy's colossal weapon materializes in Yuma's hand, locking in a direct clash. Impressed by the unusual spell, Kiria confesses he'd never seen a weapon, stealing trick like that before. However, he charges forward, warning that an identical sword doesn't make up for the huge difference in their base stats. The brutal impact of the attack tears up the floor, sending the kid flying as he tries to block the absurd force. Without giving him a chance to breathe, the lethal tip of the giant blade descends, cutting through the air to finish the hunt. Pinned in the corner of the stone room, Yuma breaks into a cold sweat, trying to keep up with the villain's monstrous speed. Revealing his true maniacal face, the warrior cheers, completely insane at the sight of others' pain and suffering. A desperate scream echoes through the fiery hall as the protagonist tries to withstand the overwhelming offensive. Far away, the psychopathic woman pins Natsume to the ground, pressing the handle of her hammer against her neck. Laughing sadistically, the killer asks if it hurts a lot and calls the sniper a poor thing. Without a shred of pity, the villain decrees that now, the fate of everyone there will be certain demise. Meanwhile, the fake hero displays a perverse smile and questions what the protagonist intends to do. At the hall's entrance, the short Narumi watches the scene, sweating bullets, and warns his partner that the situation has gone south. The thief laments that the idea of stealing the final blow from the boss seemed brilliant until he saw their absurd strength. Shimada's gaze becomes extremely serious as the short guy concludes that the two are cruel murderers. Trembling with terror, Narumi confesses he wants to help their saviors, but knows they'd end up eliminated for being too weak. The suited man immediately agrees with the cowardly idea of fleeing as fast as possible. Turning his back on the danger, the short guy mentally apologizes and swears he'll visit the hero's grave later. Pinned by the heavy attack, Yuma decides to say something important while he still has the chance to speak. The kid guarantees he's going to stop this madness right now and expose the duo's crimes to the examiners. Faced with the threat, the villain just lets out a mocking laugh, doubting the punk can survive the fight. Raising his hand in an arrogant gesture, the killer reminds him that they are the public favorites against two nobodies. With his confidence sky high, Kiria questions who in the world would believe the word of losers like them. Hearing that disgusting arrogance, Shimada clenches his fist, grinding his teeth with intense anger. The killer's words make the big guy remember the difficult old days in the fighting ring. Back then, the fighter had won an important match completely fair and square. However, his opponent made a false post claiming he had suffered low blows to ruin his reputation. Isolated in the dark, Shimada laments that no one believed his word, forcing him into an unjust retirement. That's why he bought a camera and decided to become a streamer, capable of any crazy stunt for fame. Invading restricted areas or exploring the new continent were just easy ways to generate content for his channel. He thought he could live this life of falsehood forever without a care in the world, accepting his fate. But the truth is, seeing manipulative trash act with impunity still makes the ex-fighter's blood boil with rage. Turning around with attitude, he leaves the short guy confused, not understanding the reason for such a sudden change. In the battle, the fake hero lands a sweeping kick, completely breaking the protagonist's balance. Certain of victory, the maniac announces he's going to slice the kid up very slowly and tells him to stay awake to suffer. Swinging his sword with brute force, the killer demands to hear the screams of agony from his new prey. Just then, Shimada appears out of nowhere, interrupting the attack, and realizes the villain's aura is truly terrifying up close. Annoyed by the unexpected intrusion, the psychopathic warrior turns his head, casting a completely deadly glare. Holding the camera firmly, the suited man films the scene, announcing that he has revealed the true face of the beloved duo. The fake hero grinds his teeth, indignantly questioning what those useless people came to do in the boss's chamber. Trembling nervously, the short guy approaches, explaining that he was suspicious of the situation and decided to follow them. Even though he's scared to bits, Narumi tries to maintain a brave posture in front of the relentless killers. Pounding his chest, the little thief declares they came to repay their debt by covering the hatted hero's back. Surprised by the honorable attitude of the former swindlers, the protagonist feels a great sense of relief. The maniac clicks his tongue in frustration and suggests taking out all three at once, but his partner gleefully takes on the task. The woman with the hammer charges insanely at the newly arrived duo, cursing them as filthy worms. In a move of pure defense, the big guy plants his shield in the ground, activating an absolute block skill. With an excited smile, Shimada taunts, saying he's eager to test his real endurance against her. Swinging her heavy weapon brutally, the villain tells him to try and withstand the mighty hammer of judgment. Taking advantage of the big guy holding the line, the adventurer takes a deep breath and thanks him for the vital support in the fight. Far away, the blonde sniper gets up and draws her bowstring, realizing this is the perfect chance to act. Concentrating a lot of power into her weapon, Natsume asks for just a little time to prepare a devastating shot. The short guy hears the plan and agrees instantly, guaranteeing they'll hold the line until the attack is ready. Acting quickly, the short guy throws a bomb, yelling the name of his stealth skill, Rog is Smoke. A dense gray cloud explodes across the hall, catching the maniacal warrior completely by surprise in the dark. Taking advantage of the visual distraction, the protagonist advances and lands a direct punch to the fake hero's face through the smoke. Nearby, the big guy with the shield roars, straining to contain the psychopath's repeated attacks. The employee's bow reaches maximum energy charge, and she announces that everything now depends on this single lethal shot. Releasing the magic string, Natsume fires a massive blast of light that tears through the entire hall at absurd speed. The luminous beam hits the killer dead on, making her scream in agony from the devastating burn. The force of the impact generates a huge explosion that sends the woman with the hammer flying, startling her partner. Furious at seeing his ally defeated, Kiria tries to retaliate wildly but gets a solid kick from the cloaked kid. Just then, the villain stares at his own empty hand, not understanding how his gigantic weapon vanished out of nowhere. The short guy appears, showing off the stolen greatsword, and cheers that the enemy's guard was wide open. Unable to handle the weapon's raw weight, the thief hurls the heavy blade toward the hero. The adventurer firmly grabs the hilt in mid-air, swearing that the arrogant psychopath's reign of terror ends now. Bathed in an intense blue aura, Yuma immediately activates his playful spirit to unleash its true power. The spell reconfigures the enemy's blade, transforming the tainted equipment into a purified and powerful relic. Admiring the sacred beauty of the new sword, the adventurer deduces that this was the weapon's true divine essence. With victory guaranteed in his hands, the protagonist takes a very firm step toward the cornered target. Completely terrified by the kid's absurd strength, the killer retreats desperately, begging for mercy. In a clean and perfect blow, the hero delivers a brutal, bluish slash that makes the maniac spit blood instantly. With a very serious and cold look, the young adventurer decrees that his cowardly actions are completely unforgivable. The psychopathic warrior collapses, completely destroyed, on the stone floor, ending the combat with justice. Pointing his weapon at the fallen body, Yuma announces that he will finally pay dearly for all the crimes he has committed. A short time after all that madness, the remaining teams gather calmly in the rocky area outside. The group of 4 ended up joining forces and managed to take down one of the winged bosses to round out their score. In front of the holographic screen, the examiner concludes the exam, officially announcing the names of the 10 grade approved candidates. The team cheers with pure emotion for securing their spot, and the short guy shouts, unable to hide his excitement at having survived. Completely out of her corporate character, the blonde employee smiles happily and goes to high-five Yuma. Immediately after, the girl freezes, blushing slightly, realizing she got too carried away by the contagious joy. But putting her annoying pride aside, Natsume high-fives the kid in a very animated greeting. Far from all this celebration, the dreaded corporate president just observes the view from the top of his immense tower. The corporate president reflects that the kid proved to be more capable than he imagined. With a plan in mind, he decides he will make the young man serve the guild exactly as he desires. The leader extends his hand, displaying a shining magic ring. He gives the item to the employee, ordering her to use it on the new continent as soon as she gets an opening. The system reveals the dark doll called Mitra's Eye. The artifact's magic guarantees absolute mind control over anyone who looks into its eyes for just 10 seconds. Observing the disturbing item up close, the blonde sniper immediately recognizes that the spell is a dirty mind control magic. Being a tremendous manipulator, the suited man questions if the girl can complete the mission, reinforcing that everything is for their grand ideal. The young woman hesitates for a moment, staring at her boss in tense silence. Soon after, she just lowers her head, accepting her superior's order. Sometime later, a luminous sign highlights a huge pavilion in the city hosting an official trading event among players. The inner hall is completely packed with adventurers intensely negotiating their equipment and materials. Walking calmly through the place, the protagonist confesses to his partner that he didn't expect to find so many people gathered at an open market. The adventurer suggests they stock up on good items before the big trip. Very excitedly, he guarantees that knowing how to negotiate can yield incredible prizes there. However, the kid adjusts his hat, warning his colleague to be very careful. He remembers that trade scams and fake items were common back in the game days. Hearing that extremely late warning about scammers, Natsume's eyes widen in complete shock. With a furious look, the blonde snaps that he should have warned her much earlier. Just then, she panics as she realizes the blunder she made. Trembling nervously, the employee explains that she bought a supposedly incredible piece of equipment from a guy who seemed very nice and helpful. The memory of a beautiful, elegant, shining cloak appears in her mind. Natsume cries, remembering she thought the offer was a steal for the great price. The charlatan seller flashes a friendly smile, offering the fake equipment for a seemingly good price to the buyer. Believing the lie, the employee reflects that the price is great for a magical agility piece in perfect condition. Without a second thought, Natsume hands over her credit card, confirming the big purchase while the scammer thanks her for the business. Fiddling with the holographic panel, the young man says he's already transferred the item to her inventory, making the blonde very happy. However, upon checking the system screen, the sniper is shocked to see she received only a useless old cloak that's worth nothing. Furious at the discovery, she bellows, demanding to know what that is. Naively thinking the seller just made a shipping error. But when the girl turns her head to confront the guy, she realizes the cowardly scammer has already fled far from the stall. Using his sharp perception, Yuma concludes that the crook swapped the items the exact instant she turned to get the money. Completely devastated, the corporate employee collapses to her knees on the floor, unable to believe she fell for such a basic scam. Crying with pure frustration, Natsume laments spending all her hard-earned money on that piece of junk, leaving her with nothing for the trip. The kid adjusts his hat, watching his partner whimper on the stone floor, very calmly. He tells her to go get her money back. An intense, greenish magic envelops the adventurer's hand as he smiles cunningly. Full of confidence, he warns never to underestimate his class. Walking toward the stealthy target, the protagonist tells the blonde to just watch how a real player handles things. Far away, the dishonest seller walks calmly through the open market, looking for his next knave victim in the crowd. Without drawing much attention, Yuma appears behind the guy and gently taps his shoulder, asking to talk in a corner. Playing dumb, the kid asks if the guy is open to a trade, commenting that he saw him showing off great equipment earlier. The scammer flashes a friendly smile, while laughing internally for having found another perfect sucker to pull his dirty trick on. Yuma shows off an old wooden sword, confessing he doesn't have much money, but asks if the seller would accept a direct trade. Upon laying eyes on the kid's weapon, the charlatan starts to sweat, his eyes widening in a mix of shock and surprise. The protagonist's illusion skill makes the scammer see the useless wood as a mystical and priceless ancient golden sword. The swindler thinks the kid is an idiot for not knowing the weapon's value. Feigning insecurity, Yuma asks if the sword isn't enough. The guy smiles maliciously, certain that the kid is the easiest target in the world. Then, he says he'll look for something good for the trade. Placing some luxurious pieces on the counter, the thief suggests giving all 3 valuable items in exchange for the adventurer's weapon. Getting into character, Yuma pretends to be extremely amazed and asks if the guy would really give him all that. Maintaining the generous seller pose, the charlatan points to the relics, confirming the offer to seal the big deal. The kid's system screen confirms he's receiving the real stolen cloak from his partner, and also a magical horn. On top of that, the successful negotiation also includes a very rare, shining spirit stone radiating a lot of energy. The protagonist accepts the offer instantly, handing over the fake sword. He acts perfectly, pretending to be super excited about the deal. Observing the victim's naivety, the scammer smiles sadistically, thinking he hit the jackpot by pulling one over on such a dumb newbie. Completely blinded by his own greed, the guy grabs the hilt of the weapon, mentally cheering for having won the day's grand prize. As soon as the deal is closed, the bluff spell wears off, revealing that the mystical golden relic has turned back into a simple piece of useless wood. The swindler's eyes widen in confusion, not understanding how his valuable sword turned into junk overnight in his hands. Completely desperate, the man yells that this must be a joke while the adventurer runs back, laughing at the perfect revenge. Returning the stolen cloak to the proud sniper, Yuma congratulates his colleague with a smile for recovering the item she wanted so badly. Natsume points a finger in the guy's face, demanding an explanation. Sweating with fear, the charlatan finally recognizes her as the victim of the previous scam. The blonde gives the fallen scoundrel a major scolding, while the protagonist reflects that overconfident swindlers are the easiest targets to fool in the end. Sitting on the floor, completely defeated, the guy curses his own stupidity and accesses the hero's profile to find out what deceptive magic that was. Reading the floating screen, the ex-seller's eyes widen in amazement as he notices the young adventurer's class is the great, playful player. The protagonist turns his head in surprise, finding it strange that a simple market swindler knows about his completely hidden magic class. Accepting his sad defeat, the man admits it makes perfect sense to have been played for a fool by someone who holds one of the legendary classes of this universe. However, the ex-seller adds that this skill had been cut before the official launch, never actually being implemented in the game's updates. Suspicious of that absurd technical information, Yuma asks what's going on. Sighing heavily, the scammer reveals he used to work as a beta tester, The man explains that the beta version had several dungeons that were discarded. He reveals that even the new continent was just a map cancelled by the developers. The kid adjusts his hat, intrigued, questioning why deleted content would appear in reality. The tester assures him the answers will be in the new lands. Leaning on the floor with his head down, the guy smirks, admitting that a player of a legendary class is the perfect explorer to uncover that new mystery. In a sudden gesture of redemption, the man tosses the spirit stone to the blonde as an apology. He says the ore can be sold for a great price. The former tester turns his back and leaves the pavilion, waving casually, just wishing the two to be very careful on the dangerous journey ahead. The protagonist grins from ear to ear and thanks him for the advice, waving back, full of attitude. He guarantees he's going to enjoy every second of this great adventure at sea. A few days later, the gigantic exploration ship finally sets sail, crossing the ocean toward the immense, luminous portal that leads directly to the distant lands. Far from the known oceans, a mysterious looping beast observes the vast, wild continent filled with dangers, rocky mountains, and vast, unknown vegetation. Guided by an adventurous instinct, the players walk down the illuminated ramps toward the unknown, completely drawn by the call of this magical world. Leaning on the edge of the deck, Yuma stares at the horizon, unconcerned about the imminent risks. Focused, he wants to explore this new scenery with his own eyes. Far from the turbulent sea, the ambitious corporate leader analyzes maps in his meeting room, imagining all the untouched and abundant resources that must exist there. The suited man's mind focuses on the new hidden races and cultures, planning to mercilessly exploit the exotic materials, foods, and secrets of that unexplored magical region. A sinister glint takes over the boss's dark gaze. The tyrant is convinced this is the golden opportunity to bring absolutely everything under his guild's control. Completely blinded by immeasurable power, the president extends his hand toward the large penthos window, wanting to pocket the new continent to dominate the entire world. The corporate man clenches his fist with extreme violence, asserting his endless, greedy ambition. While the suited man vows to squeeze every drop of wealth from the lands, the adventurer smiles, feeling the breeze on his face, wanting only to have as much fun as possible on the journey. During the beautiful sunset, the sniper leans on the boat's large protective railing, calmly telling her partner that they must finally be arriving at their destination. The young blonde reflects aloud that it feels like they've been fighting for their lives for years, but deep down, she also understands that the duo's real great adventure has only just begun. In the middle of the journey, the memory of a tattered child suddenly surfaces, the thought anxiously focused on what would happen as soon as they reached their destination. Just then, Yuma and Ludian are interrupted on the deck by a strange and very sudden noise. The kid whips his head around, on alert, sensing danger approaching. A sailor comes running through the area in a complete panic. He screams at the top of his lungs, warning that there's something very wrong happening at sea. The man barely finishes his sentence before being captured by surprise, consumed by absolute terror. He yells that the ship is under attack by monsters, being violently lifted into the air by a giant tail. The employee roars in agony. The protagonist extends his hand in a quick reflex, trying to rescue the young man. However, the rescue fails and the adventurer ends up freezing in place. He lifts his head, startled, realizing up close the true scale of that bizarre threat. A colossal sea serpent rises intimidatingly over the vessel. The monstrous beast stares down at the tiny kid, ready to devastate everything in its path.